The diner smelled like burnt coffee and regret. Admiral James Keller sat in the corner booth, the same one he'd occupied every Thursday morning for 3 years since retiring to this forgotten coastal town in Oregon. He'd chosen obscurity deliberately, traded his Pentagon office for a place where nobody cared about ribbons or wars. The waitress approached with the pot, her movements precise, economical. Military, he thought immediately. Something in the way she cleared the adjacent table, checked her six, kept her back never fully turned to the door. She poured without speaking. He noticed her hands first, steady, calloused, the hands of someone who'd held more than coffee pots. Then he saw the bruises, fresh ones, purple-black against her collarbone, barely concealed by the diner uniform. Another on her wrist, finger-shaped. She caught him looking and her jaw tightened, that particular expression he'd seen on countless faces in countless debriefings. The look that said, "Don't ask, don't care, move on." "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded once, started to turn. He saw it then, the tattoo on her inner forearm, partially visible when her sleeve rode up. Wings, not Navy wings, not Air Force. Something else, something that made his coffee suddenly taste like metal and memory. He knew those wings. He'd authorized the mission that earned them. "Miss," he called softly. She stopped, didn't turn. "What's your name?" "Rachel," she said to the wall. "Rachel Santos." The name hit him like ordnance. Santos. Coulson Reaper. He'd read her file 8 years ago, read it again after the inquiry, after everything went to hell over Syria. The pilot who'd held formation through a missile lock that should have scattered her squadron. The one they'd grounded for insubordination when she'd refused to leave her wingman behind. The court-martial that never quite happened but destroyed her career anyway. And now she was here, in a town with one stoplight and dying fishing industry, pouring coffee with bruises on her neck. He watched her move to the next table, watched how she flinched when the cook shouted from the kitchen. The other customers didn't notice. Why would they? She was just the waitress, just another face in a town full of people running from something. But Keller noticed everything. 26 years leading special operations had taught him to see what others missed. And what he saw now, in Rachel Santos's eyes when she glanced back at him, was something he recognized from every mirror he'd faced after losing men. The hollow geography of someone who'd survived when survival felt like punishment. The bell above the diner door chimed. A man entered, broad-shouldered, moving with the false confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequence. Rachel's entire body went rigid. The coffee pot trembled in her hand just slightly, just enough. The man's eyes found her immediately possessive, cruel. He smiled. Keller set down his cup and began to remember what he'd come here to forget. The man took a seat at the counter, close enough to make Rachel serve him, far enough to seem casual. But nothing about this was casual. Keller watched the choreography of fear play out, how Rachel approached with her shoulders pulled inward, how she kept the counter between them, how her hand shook when she poured his coffee. The man said something low, meant only for her. Her face went blank, that 1,000-yard stare Keller had seen on shell-shocked Marines in Fallujah. "Rachel," the man said louder for the room now, "you forget my cream." "No, Derek, right here." Her voice was flat, affectless. Derek. Keller filed the name away, began constructing a profile from context clues. Local, probably worked one of the fishing boats or the lumber mill, used his size to take space he hadn't earned. The kind of man who mistook cruelty for strength. Rachel brought the cream. Derek's hand shot out, caught her wrist, the one with the bruise. She didn't cry out. That was worse somehow, her silence. It meant this was routine. "Tonight," Derek said, "don't be late. I have a shift." "I don't care." He released her. She pulled back, professional mask never slipping, and returned to the kitchen. Derek drank his coffee slow, making a show of staying, making sure she remembered he could wait, would wait, that there was nowhere she could go he wouldn't follow. Keller understood the equation instantly. Small town, limited options, no family. He could see it in how isolated she was, how no one in the diner reacted to what they'd just witnessed. They'd learned not to see. Learned that Derek was untouchable, Maybe because his family owned half the commercial fleet. Maybe because the sheriff was his uncle. Maybe just because violence unchallenged becomes law. The Admiral stood, left a 20 for a $7 breakfast, and walked to the counter. He sat one stool away from Derek, close enough. The cook emerged from the kitchen, older man, Vietnam-era tattoos, eyes that had seen things. He glanced at Keller, some recognition passing between veterans, then at Derek with undisguised contempt tempered by pragmatism. "Help you?" the cook asked Keller. "Just wanted to compliment the service. Best coffee I've had." Keller's voice carried the particular authority of someone used to being heard. "The waitress, Rachel, she's exceptional." Derek turned, sized him up, saw an old man in a worn jacket, gray hair, no threat. "She's adequate," Derek said, "when she remembers her place." Keller smiled, the smile he'd used before sending men into rooms they might not leave. Her place, interesting perspective. He extended his hand to the cook, ignoring Derek entirely. "James Keller. I'm new in town, relatively speaking, 3 years now." "Frank Rays." The cook shook, his grip testing, finding something that made him straighten slightly. "Navy." "Long time ago." Keller's eyes cut to Derek briefly, dismissively, then back to Frank. "This town always so quiet." "Depends what you're listening for." Frank understood the subtext, 30 years of unspoken military communication flowing in single syllables. Some noise nobody hears anymore. Derek stood, threw bills on the counter. "I'm out, Rachel," he shouted toward the kitchen. "Remember tonight, 8. She appeared in the kitchen window, nodded once. Derek left, the bell chiming his exit like punctuation. Keller watched through the window as he climbed into a lifted truck, all aggression and chrome. The diner felt lighter with him gone, air pressure normalizing. Rachel emerged, began clearing Derek's mess with mechanical efficiency. Keller caught her eye. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I wonder if you have a minute." "I'm working." "I know. I also know you flew Hornets out of Lemoore, deployed twice, once to the Fifth Fleet, once," he paused. "Once to somewhere they didn't put in the official record." Her hand froze on the coffee pot. When she looked at him, really looked, he saw the moment recognition hit. Not his face. They'd never met. But the knowledge he carried, the specificity. You couldn't fake that, couldn't Google classified deployments and operational call signs. "Who are you?" Her voice was different now, edged with something sharp, something that hadn't been beaten out of her yet. "Someone who read your jacket. Someone who knows what you did over Altanf." He kept his voice low. "Someone who's wondering why Callsign Reaper is serving coffee in Oregon." "That's not my Callsign anymore." "No, but it was. And those wings on your arm, those don't disappear just because someone decided you were inconvenient." He slid a business card across the counter, blank except for a phone number. "When you're ready to talk or when you need something, that number reaches me, day or night." "I don't need rescuing." "I know, that's not what this is." He stood, left the card. "But everyone needs backup eventually, even the people who learn to fly alone." He walked out, the bell singing behind him. Through the window he watched her stare at the card, saw Frank approach her, saw the brief exchange. Then she tucked it in her apron and went back to work, because that's what survivors did. They worked. They endured. They waited for the next blow and the one after that, until waiting became living and living became waiting. Keller climbed into his truck, a 15-year-old Ford that had never attracted attention, and drove 3 blocks to the town's small library. He had research to conduct, pieces to gather. Derek's last name, his family connections, his arrest record if he had one, his reputation if he didn't. The library had public computers and a reference librarian who looked delighted to have someone ask for help with anything more complex than printing boarding passes. Within an hour he had a profile. Derek Hastings, 28, part owner of Hastings Commercial Fishing, which his grandfather had founded in 1952. 3 drunk and disorderlies, charges dropped. 1 domestic violence call, 5 years ago, victim refused to press charges. Uncle was indeed the sheriff, Kenneth Hastings, elected 4 times unopposed. Mother sat on the city council. Father dead 10 years, boating accident, blood alcohol twice the legal limit. Derek had 2 brothers, both working the boats, both with similar records of almost consequences and family interventions. The Hastings family was the town. They employed 60 people directly, another 100 indirectly through processing and supply chains. Cross them, you left or starved. Simple economics weaponized. Keller made notes, took nothing the librarian could track. He thanked her, returned to his truck, drove to the harbor. He wanted to see the boats, understand the operation. The fleet was modest but well-maintained: 6 trawlers, 2 processing ships, a repair dock. Men worked steadily, unloading catch, mending nets, prepping for the next run. He recognized the rhythm, the coordinated chaos of professionals executing routine tasks. Not so different from a carrier deck, really. One of Derek's brothers had to be, same build, same aggressive posture, supervise the unloading. Keller watched from distance, cataloging. The brother shouted at a deckhand who moved too slow, shoved him nearly into the water. The other men pretended not to notice. Fear or apathy, hard to tell. Maybe both. "Help you with something?" a voice behind him. Keller turned. Sheriff Kenneth Hastings, uniform crisp, hand resting on his belt near his weapon. Not on it, not yet, but close enough to send a message. "Just looking," Keller said mildly. "Nice harbor, thinking about maybe getting a small boat, retirement hobby." "You're the one renting the Miller place." "Not a question. Small town arithmetic. James Keller." "That's right. Navy man, I heard." "Long time ago." Keller smiled, easy, non-threatening, trying to forget all that. "Good luck with that." Kenneth studied him, cop eyes looking for leverage. Town like this, everybody knows everybody. Gets uncomfortable when strangers start asking questions, watching things that don't concern them. No questions, no watching, just an old man looking at boats. "Uh-huh." Kenneth's hand moved away from his belt. "Piece of advice, Mr. Keller. Town's got its rhythms. Best not to disturb them. People here, we take care of our own problems our own way. Don't need outside help, don't want it, clear." "Crystal?" Keller nodded, still smiling. "Appreciate the welcome." Kenneth held his gaze another moment, then walked away, boots heavy on the wooden planks. Keller waited 5 minutes, watching the boats, then returned to his truck. He'd gotten what he came for, confirmation that the Hastings family operated as a closed system, self-regulating, allergic to scrutiny, and that Rachel Santos had somehow ended up in their gravity well, trapped by circumstances he didn't yet understand but could imagine. Back at his rental, a small house overlooking the ocean, Keller made coffee and stood on the porch. The Pacific stretched gray and infinite, waves breaking against rocks with metronomic inevitability. He'd come here for this, for the emptiness and the rhythm, for a place to decompress after 26 years of calculated violence. He'd commanded SEAL teams, planned operations that turned on split-second decisions and would never appear in history books. He'd sent young men into darkness, and mostly they'd come back. The ones who hadn't, their faces visited him in the spaces between sleep and waking. He'd thought retirement would quiet those voices. It hadn't. So he'd tried isolation instead, traded medals for anonymity, hoped that distance from the war machine would grant him something like peace. For 3 years it almost worked. He fished, read, ran the same 5-mile loop every morning, existed in the gentle monotony of a life that demanded nothing. Then Rachel Santos poured his coffee and he remembered what he'd been running from, the obligation to act when action was possible, the moral weight of capability. He could walk away, let her fight her own battles, respect her right to handle her problems however she saw fit. That was the civilian answer, the answer that respected boundaries and autonomy. But Keller wasn't fully civilian, probably never would be, and he recognized something in Rachel, something beyond the bruises and the fear. He saw the same thing he'd seen in himself after bad missions, someone who'd survived but hadn't escaped, someone still fighting a war that everyone else declared over. His phone buzzed. Unknown number, he answered. "This is Rachel Santos." Her voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk, not at the diner, not anywhere he might see." "When and where?" "Lighthouse Point, North End, 1 hour." She hung up. Keller looked at his watch. He had time. He went inside, opened the closet in the spare bedroom, pulled down a box from the top shelf. Inside, a Sig Sauer P226, cleaned and maintained monthly despite never being fired in 3 years, 2 spare magazines, a tactical knife, and a worn leather portfolio containing documents he'd sworn to destroy but couldn't. They were insurance, proof of things that powerful people would prefer stayed buried. He took only the phone number of a man he'd served with, someone still active, someone who owed him enough that questions wouldn't be asked. Then he locked the box, secured the house, and drove north. The lighthouse had been decommissioned in the 70s, replaced by automated systems and GPS. Now it stood empty, paint peeling, surrounded by state park land that saw more eagles than people. The access road was dirt and gravel, narrow, easy to monitor. Good tactical choice. He parked and walked the last quarter mile, old habits reasserting themselves. He checked sight lines, noted escape routes, listened for the sound of other vehicles. Rachel sat on a bench overlooking the water, still in her diner uniform. She'd brought a jacket, hands thrust deep in pockets, shoulders hunched against the wind. She didn't turn when he approached, but he knew she'd tracked his arrival. Fighter pilot instincts didn't fade. "Thank you for coming," she said to the ocean. "Of course." He sat, left space between them, gave her control of the distance. "What do you need?" "I need," she stopped, breathed, started again. "I need to know if I'm crazy, if what I remember actually happened, or if I've been alone so long I've started inventing things." "Al Tanf," he said quietly. "November 2017. You were flying CAP over the deconfliction zone when a Syrian Su-22 locked up your wingman. You should have broken off, maintained safety protocols. Instead, you painted him with your own radar, drew his attention, stayed between him and your wingman for 9 minutes while he tried to get a missile solution on you. The Syrian finally broke off when an F-15 from another squadron arrived. You shepherded your wingman back to the carrier. He was a lieutenant on his first deployment. You were a lieutenant commander with 300 carrier landings and a reputation for ice water in your veins. They grounded me," she said. "Said I violated rules of engagement. Said I escalated when I should have retreated." "I know. I read the report. I also read the one they classified, the one that explained the Syrian pilot was known for disregarding deconfliction protocols, that he'd forced 3 aircraft out of the zone the previous month. Your wingman's name was Lieutenant Mark Chen. He had a wife and a 2-year-old daughter. The investigation determined you saved his life." "Then why," her voice cracked, "why did they end my career?" "Politics. The incident got attention at levels where attention becomes liability. Someone decided you were too aggressive, too willing to risk international incident. Someone else decided you were too difficult, too unwilling to accept that sometimes the mission is keeping things quiet rather than keeping people safe. They couldn't court-martial you. The facts wouldn't support it. So they grounded you, transferred you to training command, made it clear your path to squadron command was closed. And you, being who you are, refused to accept that, fought it, made noise. So they offered you an early retirement with full benefits if you went quietly, or a desk job in logistics if you didn't. You took the retirement." She was crying now, silent tears that she didn't bother to wipe. "I didn't know what else to do. My family, they're gone. Dad died when I was in flight school, Mom 2 years later. No siblings. The Navy was everything. And then it was nothing. I came here because it was far away and cheap, and I thought," she laughed bitterly, "I thought I could disappear." "Derek." "Met him 6 months after I arrived. He seemed nice at first, attentive. I was lonely, stupid." She turned to face Keller finally. Her eyes were hollow, used up. "First time he hit me, I broke his nose, should have left then. But he apologized, cried, said his father used to beat him, said he'd get help. And I believed him, or wanted to. 3 months later it happened again. Worse, I tried to leave. He found me at a motel in the next town, convinced the owner I was his fiancée having a breakdown, brought me back. I went to the police. Kenneth Hastings took my statement, very professional, very sympathetic. Nothing happened. I tried again. Same result. The third time, Kenneth pulled me aside, explained how things work here. Explained that Derek's family keeps the town alive, that without them 100 families have no income, that sometimes we accept small injustices to prevent larger ones. He suggested I consider what accusing Derek would do to all those people who depend on Hastings boats for their livelihoods. He threatened you. He made me complicit, that's worse. She wrapped her arms around herself. I've been trying to save enough to leave, really leave, go somewhere they can't find me. But Derek watches my money, takes my cash tips. I've got maybe $200 hidden, not enough to get far enough. She looked at Keller directly now. I don't want your money. I don't want you to fix this. I just needed someone who understands that I'm not weak, not crazy, not imagining that I could have been more than this. You are more than this. You're still Reaper. That doesn't change. Call signs are for pilots. I'm a waitress. No, Keller said firmly. You're a combat veteran who got lost in transition. Happens to the best of us. Doesn't diminish what you were or what you can still be. He paused, choosing words carefully. I'm not going to tell you what to do, Rachel, your life, your choices, but I will tell you that you have options beyond what you've been seeing. And if you decide you want help, tactical support, resources to execute an extraction, I can provide that. No judgment, no obligation. Just one veteran looking out for another. She studied him, pilot's eyes measuring, calculating. Why would you help me? You don't know me. I know enough, and I'm tired of watching people suffer because I chose comfort over action. He stood. My offer stands. The number I gave you is secure. Use it if you need it. He started to walk away, stopped. One more thing. Tonight when Derek expects you at 8, where? His place above the harbor. Don't go. He'll come to the diner, make a scene. Let him be around people. Stay visible. He's dangerous, but he's not stupid. He won't do anything in front of witnesses if he thinks there might be consequences. There won't be consequences. There never are. Maybe, Keller said. Or maybe tonight's different, your choice. He walked back to his truck, leaving her with the lighthouse and the wind and the decision that only she could make. That evening, Keller sat in his truck in the diner parking lot. He'd positioned himself with a sight line to the entrance, to Rachel's car, a rust-eaten Honda Civic with expired registration, to the street. At 7:45, Derek's truck pulled up, aggressive exhaust rattling windows. Derek got out, stood by his vehicle for a moment, checking his phone, projecting ownership. At 7:50, Rachel emerged from the diner. Frank was with her, wiping his hands on his apron, his presence deliberate. Derek's jaw tightened. He approached, his body language dominating space. Keller couldn't hear the conversation, but he read the choreography. Derek demanding, Rachel refusing, Frank intervening. Derek squaring up to Frank, then backing down fractionally when two other men, regulars, looked like construction workers, emerged from the diner, coffee cups in hand, not engaging but present. Derek said something final, pointed at Rachel, then at his truck, making a threat everyone could see. Then he climbed in and peeled out, laying rubber, announcing his displeasure to the whole street. Rachel stood frozen, Frank's hand on her shoulder. The construction workers nodded at her, went to their own vehicle, lingered until Rachel got in her car and drove off. They followed her for 2 blocks, then split off. Informal escort, Keller noted. Maybe the town had more good people than he'd thought. They were just scared, cowed by economic reality and Hastings' leverage. He waited another 30 minutes, watching the street quiet down, then drove home. No calls on the secure phone. He hadn't expected any tonight. Rachel needed time to process, to decide if trusting him was more dangerous than her current situation. He understood that calculus. Had made similar decisions 100 times in the field. Trust the intelligence officer who might be compromised. Rely on the local militia that might have Taliban sympathies. believe the translator whose cousin was killed by American bombs. Every choice contained multitudes of risk. He slept poorly, dreams full of faces he hadn't seen in years. His first team, the one he'd led into Helmand Province in 2004, they'd lost 2 men on that deployment, good men, men with families. He remembered writing the letters, remembered standing at attention while flag-draped coffins loaded into C-17s, remembered the weight of command, how it never quite left your shoulders even decades later. At dawn he ran his 5 miles, showered, drove to the diner. Different waitress working, older woman named Margaret who'd served him before. Rachel's day off, Margaret explained. Keller nodded, ordered breakfast, ate mechanically while reading a newspaper he didn't care about. His phone buzzed. Rachel. "I want out," she said without preamble. "I want to leave this town, leave Derek, start over. Can you actually help with that, or were you just being kind?" "I can help. Are you safe right now?" "I'm at work, covering a shift for someone. Derek's on the boats, won't be back until tonight." "When's your next day off?" "Tomorrow." "Pack light, essentials only. Documents, photos you can't replace, medication if you need it. Nothing that will be noticed missing. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Tomorrow, 0900 Lighthouse Point. Bring your car. We'll get you out clean." "What about Derek? He'll come looking." "Let me worry about Derek. You just focus on getting ready to leave." She was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you. I don't know what else to say." "You don't have to say anything. See you tomorrow." He hung up, finished his coffee, went home to make arrangements. First call went to Marcus Grant, a former SEAL commander now running a private security firm in Seattle. Marcus owed him multiple favors, the kind that transcended normal reciprocity. "Admiral," Marcus answered on the first ring. "Didn't expect to hear from you. Thought you were dead or enlightened, whichever comes first in retirement." "Neither yet. I need a favor." "Name it." "Extraction, single civilian, small town on Oregon coast. No legal complications, just need clean transport and temporary housing while she gets established somewhere new. Maybe employment assistance if your firm has openings for someone with military aviation background." "Aviation, what's she fly?" "FA-18s, combat veteran, good record, got pushed out for being too competent and too honest." Marcus whistled low. "My kind of people. When and where?" "Tomorrow, 1,000 hours. I'll text coordinates. She'll need security escort for at least a month, maybe longer, until we're sure the situation is resolved." "The situation have a name?" "Derek Hastings. Local abuser with family connections to law enforcement. Not sophisticated but persistent. Likely to escalate when he realizes she's gone." "We'll handle it. Anything else?" "Can you place her somewhere? Job, housing. She's starting from zero." "I've got contracts with 3 airlines that are desperate for pilots with military experience. And we've got corporate housing in Seattle she can use temporarily. Consider it done." "Marcus." "Don't. You pulled me out of Ramadi when I got hit. Carried me 300 meters under fire. We're not even close to even." Keller closed his eyes, remembered that day, remembered Marcus's blood soaking through his uniform, remembered the weight and the fear and the certainty that they were both going to die in that street. "Okay, thank you." 0930 Lighthouse Point, we'll be there. Second call went to an attorney he'd consulted once before, a woman named Patricia Chu who specialized in victims' rights and had a reputation for aggressive advocacy. He explained the situation in broad terms, asked what Rachel's legal options were if Derek tried to follow her, what protection she could secure. Patricia listened, asked sharp questions, then said, "I can file for a restraining order in the county where she relocates. It won't stop him if he's determined, but it creates a legal record and consequences if he violates it. More importantly, I can work with local law enforcement in the new jurisdiction to ensure they take the threat seriously. If he crosses state lines to harass or harm her, that's federal. FBI gets involved. Changes the calculus. How much? For you, pro bono. I read about what your teams did in Afghanistan, the schools you helped build, the women you protected. This is the same fight, different terrain. He wasn't going to argue. I'll have her contact you once she's settled. Looking forward to it. And Admiral, tell her she's already won the hard part. She asked for help. Everything after that is just logistics. He spent the rest of the day preparing his own role in the operation. He drove the route Rachel would take, identified potential choke points where Derek might intercept if he got word early, planned alternates. He verified that Marcus's team would arrive via helicopter, less visible, more professional, harder to follow. He confirmed backup transportation in case Rachel's car failed. He prepared cash, $5,000 from an emergency fund he'd maintained since retirement, money that had no electronic trail. That evening he sat on his porch and watched the sun descend into the Pacific, the sky bruising purple and gold. Somewhere out there Rachel was packing her life into bags, making impossible choices about what pieces of her past deserved space in her future. He knew that calculus too. When you left everything behind, every object became weighted with meaning. The photograph of your mother that meant nothing for years suddenly became essential. The book you'd carried through 3 deployments became a tether to identity. His phone rang, unknown number. He almost didn't answer, then instinct changed his mind. Is this Keller? A man's voice, deep, aggressive. Who's asking? Derek Hastings. I understand you've been talking to my girlfriend. I've talked to a lot of people, small town. Don't play stupid. Rachel, you gave her your number, told her some bullshit about backup. What's your angle, old man? You trying to fuck her? Keller's voice went cold, the temperature he reserved for enemies who didn't understand what they were facing. Mr. Hastings, I'm going to give you some advice. Walk away from Rachel Santos. Find someone else to terrorize. Because if you continue down this path, you're going to discover that some problems solve themselves and some problems require more permanent solutions. I'm offering you the first option. Don't make me provide the second. Are you threatening me? Derek laughed, ugly sound. You know who I am, who my family is. I know exactly who you are. The question is whether you know who I am. I'll give you a hint. I'm someone who spent 26 years teaching young men how to solve complex problems in hostile environments with extreme prejudice. I'm someone with resources you can't imagine and friends who don't ask questions. I'm someone who's very, very tired of watching cowards abuse people who can't fight back. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave Rachel alone, completely alone. You're not going to call her, text her, drive past her house, ask your friends to check on her, nothing. You're going to forget she exists, because if you don't, he paused. Have you ever heard of PTSD, Derek? How sometimes combat veterans have nightmares about things they did overseas. How sometimes those nightmares involve creative solutions to problems that seemed unsolvable. I have those nightmares. And increasingly, you're starting to look like the kind of problem that could inspire a very bad dream. Silence, then, you're fucking insane. Probably, 26 years of war does that. But here's the thing about insanity, Derek. It makes you unpredictable, and unpredictable is dangerous. So ask yourself, is Rachel Santos worth finding out what an insane retired SEAL admiral might do if you push him? Is she worth losing sleep over? Worth looking over your shoulder every time you walk to your truck? Worth wondering if that car behind you is following you? Worth questioning whether your brakes are going to work? I'll call the cops. Please do. Call your uncle. Explain to him that you got a threatening phone call from a man who said some vague things that maybe sound scary if you're prone to paranoia. See what he says. See if he wants to investigate a retired admiral with no criminal record, who's done nothing but drink coffee and mind his own business for 3 years. Or see if maybe he suggests you drop this, move on, find a different girlfriend. I'm betting option 2. He hung up, blocked the number. His hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear. He'd been too afraid too many times for phone calls to trigger that response. but from anger, from the sudden vivid recognition of how much he missed having clear enemies and clearer solutions. He poured himself bourbon, 2 fingers, no ice, and sat in the darkness of his living room. The call was a gamble. It might scare Derek off or it might escalate him, make him more dangerous. But Keller had read the profile, understood the psychology. Men like Derek were bullies who'd never faced real consequence. Confronted by someone they perceived as more dangerous, they typically retreated. Their violence was conditional, predicated on maintaining dominance. Once that dominance was challenged by a credible threat, they reassessed. At least that was the theory. By tomorrow evening he'd know if he was right. The next morning arrived cold and gray, fog rolling in from the Pacific and mooting the world. Keller reached the lighthouse at 8:30, did a perimeter check, confirmed no vehicles, no surveillance, no complications. At 9:30, Marcus's helicopter came in low over the water, a sleek civilian model that could have been tourists or executives or anything benign. It settled on the packed earth near the parking area, rotors slowing. 3 men emerged. Marcus first, still built like he could run through walls, graying at the temples but otherwise unchanged from Ramadi. 2 others, younger, fit, alert, obviously former military, obviously capable. They moved like seals, checking angles, securing the area without being told. Admiral, Marcus gripped his hand, brief smile. Feels like old times. Except no one's shooting at us. Yet, Marcus turned to his team. This is Rodriguez and Chen, best operators I've got. Keller shook hands, noted their grips, their eye contact, the way they assessed him even while being respectful. Good men. At 8:55, Rachel's Honda limped into the parking area, engine knocking ominously. She got out carrying 2 duffel bags and a backpack, everything she owned that mattered compressed into portable weight. She saw the helicopter, the men, Keller, and for a moment her face showed naked hope and terror combined. Then she squared her shoulders, walked forward with her head up, the pilot returning to the flight line. Ms. Santos, Keller made introductions. This is Marcus Grant and his team. They're going to escort you to Seattle, get you established, help you find employment. Employment, her voice was small. You're a pilot, Marcus said simply. We've got contacts with Alaska Airlines, United Delta. All of them have programs for military aviators transitioning to civilian aviation. You interested? Her eyes filled. She nodded, couldn't speak. Okay then, let's load up and get moving. We want to be wheels up before anyone notices you're gone. Marcus gestured to his team. They took her bags, moved efficiently to stow them in the helicopter. Rachel turned to Keller. I don't know how to thank you. You already did, you asked for help. That took more courage than anything you did in Syria. He pulled out an envelope, handed it to her. Cash, enough for first month's rent and expenses. Patricia Chu's card is in there too. She's an attorney. She'll help you file restraining orders and handle any legal issues. And my number in case you need anything else. I can't take your money. Yes, you can. Consider it back pay from a grateful nation that forgot to be grateful. She clutched the envelope, then suddenly stepped forward and hugged him, brief and fierce. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me. Then she was moving toward the helicopter, climbing in, strapping herself into the seat. The rotors spun up, increasing pitch, and the aircraft lifted smoothly, nose tilting forward, accelerating over the water. Keller watched until it was a speck against the gray sky, then gone entirely. He stood alone in the fog, listening to the waves, feeling something like peace. That lasted approximately 4 hours. He was home reading when his phone buzzed. Frank from the diner, number pulled from his credit card receipt. You need to get down here. Derek's tearing the place apart looking for Rachel. Keller drove fast, arrived to find Derek's truck parked sideways across 3 spaces, driver's door open, truck still running. Inside the diner, Derek had Frank by the shirt, shaking him, shouting questions. Margaret huddled behind the counter, phone in hand. 2 customers, the construction workers from before, stood at a careful distance, ready to intervene but smart enough to be cautious. "Where is she?" Derek screamed. "Where the fuck did she go?" "I don't know, man," Frank said, hands up, placating. "She called in sick. I don't know anything." Keller walked in, let the door close loudly. Derek spun, saw him, and something clicked. Recognition. Rage. "You," Derek said. "You did this. Where is she?" "Safe. That's all you need to know." Keller's voice was level calm. "Now let go of Frank and walk out of here before this gets complicated." Derek released Frank, turned fully to face Keller. He was taller, broader, 30 years younger. None of that mattered. "You think you can just take her? She's mine. She's not property, and she's gone. Accept it, move on, find someone else to terrorize. That's the smart play." "Smart?" Derek's laugh was manic. "I'm going to break you in half, old man." He charged, all aggression and momentum and zero technique. Keller sidestepped minimally, used Derek's own energy to redirect him into a table. Derek crashed through it, scrambled up, came again. This time Keller let him close, then struck precise, targeted, not designed to injure permanently but to immobilize. Pressure, point under the jaw, knee to the solar plexus, arm twisted behind the back, face pressed to the floor. Derek thrashed, couldn't move. Keller applied just enough pressure to make it clear who controlled the situation. "And carefully," Keller said quietly. "Rachel is gone. You will not find her. You will not look for her. If you try, I will know. And if I know, I will make sure everyone in this town learns exactly what you've been doing to her. The bruises, the threats, the isolation. I have photographs. I have testimony. I have enough to destroy what's left of your reputation and turn the Hastings name into a cautionary tale about domestic violence. Your family's business might survive, but your role in it, done. Is that what you want?" "Fuck you." Keller increased pressure fractionally. Derek gasped. "Is that what you want?" "No," Derek choked out. "Then we have an agreement. You leave her alone, I leave you alone. You come near her, you try to find her, you even say her name in public, I bury you. We clear." "Clear." Keller released him, stepped back. Derek scrambled to his feet, face red, humiliated in front of witnesses. He wanted to attack again. Keller could see it, but survival instinct overrode rage. He backed toward the door, pointed at Keller. "This isn't over." "Yeah," Keller said, "it is." Derek left, tires screaming as he peeled out. The diner was silent. Then Margaret started crying, relief and leftover fear. Frank looked at Keller with complicated expression, gratitude mixed with concern. "He's going to come after you," Frank said. "Probably, but he won't come after Rachel. That's what matters." Keller pulled out his wallet, left $200 on the counter. "For the table, and Margaret's shift. She's earned a break." He left before they could argue, drove home, waited for the next shoe to drop. It came 2 hours later. Sheriff Kenneth Hastings at his door, 2 deputies flanking him. "Mr. Keller, I need you to come with us. Derek's filing assault charges." "He attacked me. I defended myself. Multiple witnesses." "Witnesses say you provoked him, used excessive force." "Look, I don't want this to be a big deal, but my nephew's got a split lip and bruised ribs. His lawyer's already talking lawsuit, so you can come willingly or in handcuffs. Your choice." Keller went willingly. At the station, they put him in an interview room, left him alone for 40 minutes. Standard intimidation technique. It didn't work. He'd been trained to resist interrogation by experts. Kenneth Hastings was not an expert. When the sheriff finally entered, he had a file folder which he opened theatrically. "So I looked into your background. Turns out you're a decorated veteran. SEAL Commander, Purple Heart, Bronze Star with Valor device. Impressive. Also turns out you've got no criminal record, no history of violence, no red flags. Which makes me wonder why you'd suddenly assault my nephew in a public place. Your nephew was attacking the owner of the diner. I intervened to prevent further violence. If he wants to file charges, I welcome the discovery process. I'm sure the court would be very interested in his history with Rachel Santos, the multiple times she tried to report domestic violence, and the multiple times your department declined to investigate. I'm also sure the state attorney general's office would be interested in a small-town sheriff covering for his violent nephew. Kenneth's face hardened. You threatening me? No, explaining consequences. Your move, sheriff. They stared at each other, two men who'd lived enough life to recognize when a fight was worth having. Kenneth closed the folder. Get out of my town. No. Excuse me. I said no. I'm retired here. I pay taxes here. I've committed no crime. You have no legal basis to compel me to leave. So either charge me with something or let me go. Kenneth stood, walked to the door, turned. You just made a powerful enemy. Sheriff, I've had enemies with armies and air support. You and your nephew don't even register. Now either book me or I'm leaving. They let him go. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the station parking lot in orange and red. Keller walked to his truck, drove home, and poured himself a large bourbon. His hands were steady. His conscience was clear. Rachel Santos was safe. That was the mission, and the mission was accomplished. But Frank was right about one thing. Derek wasn't going to let this go. Men like him couldn't. Backing down meant acknowledging weakness, and their entire identity was built on dominance. So the situation would escalate. Derek would come for him eventually, and probably not alone. Keller was fine with that. Better him than Rachel. 3 days passed. The town felt different, charged with low-level tension. People looked at him differently, some with grudging respect, others with suspicion, most with the careful neutrality of those who'd learned not to take sides. The Hastings family had power, but Keller had done something no one else had. He challenged them and walked away. On the 4th day, Marcus called. She's doing great, he reported. Passed her first interview with Alaska Airlines, they're expediting her through training. She's in corporate housing, seeing a therapist twice a week, starting to remember what life feels like without fear. She asks about you every time we talk. Tell her I'm fine. Are you? Because my contacts in Oregon tell me the local sheriff is sniffing around, and Derek Hastings is telling anyone who'll listen that he's going to make you pay. Derek's all talk. Admiral, you know that's not true. Cornered animals get dangerous. I know, I'm ready. You need backup. For one roid rage fisherman, I think I can manage. It's never just one. These family operations, they're tribal. You hurt one, you hurt all of them. Could be 5 guys jumping you in a parking lot. Then it'll be a very educational moment for 5 guys. Marcus sighed. Stubborn doesn't begin to cover it. Okay, I'm sending Rodriguez down. He'll keep distance, just overwatch, make sure nothing gets too out of hand. And before you argue, he's already on his way. Marcus. Non-negotiable. Rachel would never forgive me if something happened to you because we left you hanging. Consider it professional courtesy. Rodriguez arrived that evening, checked into the motel at the edge of town, made contact via text. Former SEAL, sniper qualified, exactly the kind of backup Keller didn't need but appreciated anyway. It meant Marcus was taking the threat seriously, which meant Keller probably should too. A week became 2. The tension didn't dissipate, but it didn't explode either. Derek stayed away from the diner, stayed on the boats, drank at the Hastings-owned bar where Keller never went. Keller maintained his routine, visible but not provocative, existing in the space between retreat and aggression. Then on a Tuesday night, his front window shattered. A brick sailed through, landed on his living room floor. No note, no message needed. He checked the street, saw Derek's truck accelerating away, 2 other vehicles following. They wanted him to know it was them. He called Kenneth Hastings. Your nephew just vandalized my property. You got proof? I've got tire tracks, witnesses, and about 30 years of investigative experience. But sure, let's pretend we don't both know exactly what happened. File a report, I'll look into it. No, you won't. But that's okay. I'm documenting everything, building a case. When I'm done, I'm going to federal authorities, going to show them a pattern of corruption, intimidation, and domestic violence that your department has been covering for years. I'm going to bury you and your whole family. And then I'm going to make sure every news outlet on the West Coast knows about the sheriff who protected his abuser nephew while good people suffered. You're making things worse for yourself. Or I'm making things better for everyone else. Perspective matters. He hung up. Rodriguez called 60 seconds later. I saw the whole thing. Got plates, got faces. Say the word and I can make their lives very complicated. Not yet. Let them feel confident. Confident people make mistakes. 2 nights later, they came for him. 4 of them, Derek and 3 others, probably cousins or employees. They waited until 2 a.m., broke through his back door, came in hard. But Keller wasn't sleeping. He'd been expecting this since the brick. He met them in his kitchen, holding a Maglite flashlight heavy enough to qualify as a club. The fight was brief and violent. They had numbers, he had training and rage and moral clarity. Someone swung a bat, he broke their hand with the flashlight. Derek tried to tackle him, he dropped Derek with a knee to the face. Another one pulled a knife, he disarmed and dislocated the shoulder in one motion. The 4th one ran. When it was over, 3 men were on the floor, groaning, bleeding, rethinking their life choices. Keller called 911, reported a home invasion, gave the address. Then he called Rodriguez. Get here, bring your camera. I need documentation. Rodriguez arrived before the deputies, took photos of everything. The forced entry, the weapons, the injuries, Keller's own split knuckles and bruised ribs. Evidence preserved by a professional. When Kenneth Hastings arrived, his face was stone. He looked at his nephew on the floor, nose clearly broken, looked at the other 2, looked at Keller standing calmly with his flashlight, not a mark on him except defensive wounds. They broke into my home, Keller said evenly. I defended myself. Multiple felonies here, Sheriff. Breaking and entering, assault with deadly weapons, attempted murder arguably. You going to arrest them, or are we going to add obstruction of justice to your growing list of crimes? Kenneth said nothing for a long moment, then cuff them. The deputies hesitated, shocked. Kenneth repeated himself harder. I said cuff them, all 3. Derek started screaming, claiming setup, claiming Keller had lured them there. No one believed him. The evidence was too clear, the pattern too obvious. As they loaded Derek into a patrol car, Kenneth approached Keller. This ends now, the sheriff said. You press charges, I process them, then you leave, we're done with this. Agreed. As long as Rachel stays left alone, as long as this town learns that domestic violence has consequences, we're done. Kenneth nodded once, got in his vehicle, drove away. Keller stood on his porch, watching the lights disappear, feeling the adrenaline finally start to fade. Rodriguez approached, tactical bag over his shoulder. Hell of a retirement you got here, Rodriguez said. Quieter than Fallujah. Not by much, Rodriguez smiled. Admiral, you did good. That woman's safe, these assholes are facing real consequences and you didn't kill anybody. I call that a win. Yeah, Keller looked at the broken door, the shattered glass, the blood on his kitchen tile. Yeah, me too. Derek Hastings pled guilty to avoid trial. 3 years, eligible for parole in 18 months. His brothers pled out 2 lesser charges, probation. The Hastings family business continued but diminished somehow, reputation tarnished. Kenneth resigned as sheriff, took a job 2 counties over. A new sheriff was appointed, a woman from Seattle who'd prosecuted domestic violence cases for 15 years. She made clear that things were changing. And slowly they did. 2 more women came forward with stories about the Hastings brothers. The new sheriff investigated, charges were filed. The town began to remember that justice was supposed to be blind, not just selectively enforced. Rachel called Keller 3 months later. I start flying for Alaska next week, she said. I'm terrified and excited and I can't believe this is real. It's real, you earned it. No, you gave it to me. I gave you a ride and some cash. You did everything else. The courage to leave, the work to rebuild, the decision to keep going, that was all you, Reaper. She was quiet. Then, thank you for that, for using my call sign. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear it. You earned that too. Those wings on your arm, they're not decoration, they're proof. A year later, Keller sat in his usual booth at the diner. Margaret brought coffee without asking. Frank waved from the kitchen. The table Derek had crashed through was replaced, the atmosphere lighter somehow. The town had exhaled, released tension it hadn't known it was carrying. His phone buzzed. Rachel again, but this time a photo. Her in Alaska Airlines uniform standing in front of a 737, grinning like she'd won the lottery. The caption read, "First commercial flight. Thinking of Altanf. Thinking of you, still Reaper." He smiled, texted back, "Once a pilot, always a pilot. Proud of you." He finished his coffee, left his usual 20 on the table, walked out into the morning. The ocean stretched forever, the sky vast and clean. Somewhere up there, Rachel Santos was flying again, free and competent, and finally seeing the horizon she deserved. Admiral James Keller had come to this town to forget. Instead, he'd remembered why he'd served in the first place. Because some fights are worth having. Because protecting the vulnerable matters more than comfort. Because the skills learned in war can save lives in peace. He climbed into his truck, drove home, and for the first time in 3 years, the faces that visited him at night weren't only the men he'd lost. Now there was also the one he'd helped save. And somehow, that made all the difference.